Welcome back to the Messy Reformation. My name's Jason Rice. I'm the lead pastor at Faith Community CRC in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. My co-host is Willie Cronky. He's a member at Pease CRC in Pease, Minnesota. We're just a couple of guys who love the Christian Reformed Church and want to see Reformation happen in our denomination. But we realize that whenever Reformation happens in the history of the church, things get messy. And coming out of Synod 2024, things continue to be messy. So we're taking the opportunity to have conversations with pastors throughout the Christian Reformed Church to find out what's going on in our denomination, but also to talk about what Reformation might look like. If you haven't already, take a moment, click subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming content. We're dropping episodes every single Sunday evening. It's also important for you to know that you are our marketing plan. We rely on you to spread the word about what we're doing at the Messy Reformation. We rely on you to share our content. We also rely on you to give us 5-star reviews and provide good feedback for this podcast so that the algorithms put out our content further into the world. You are our marketing plan, and we believe we've placed our marketing in good hands. You can also support us financially on Patreon or Substack. All of the money raised is used to further the mission and the platform of the Messy Reformation. With all that said, we're going to get to this week's episode, which is part 2 of our conversation with Steve Zwart. I want to transition just a little bit. This may seem kind of out of left field, but I really do want to have a conversation because it fits with everything we've been talking about. I want to talk about Synod 2023 because you got to, you've as you've mentioned, you keep getting thrown into all these kind of difficult positions. And I guess before I ask my question, just a quick one: how many times have you served at Synod over the years?
I believe I've been there 5 times now.
Okay. All right, so Synod 2023 was your 5th time being at Synod. Okay, so you're kind of a Synod veteran then. You've got some experience there, but what was going through your mind when you found out that you were going to be on, I think it was Committee 7 that year, right? The Human Sexuality Committee.
What other plans I could schedule for that week? Looking to see who the alternate was? No. I'll have to admit, I got a little lump in my throat initially when I opened up that email and discovered that was going to be the committee I was going to be on, and we were going to be tasked with processing 40-some, overtures and communications, and knowing that we would have a very diverse committee, and that I tried to anticipate some of the conversations, but really, with Synod work like that, you're probably best trying to not overthink before you get there. I mean, read your materials, get yourself ready, but you really have to just be ready to step into the moment and collectively process with 25 other people in that room. Okay, how are we going to do this? And so I was really grateful for our chair. We ended up agreeing to disagree at the end of the day, but I thought he for all the work we had in front of us, he broke it down into workable chunks so that by the time we got to the floor of Synod, the vast majority of the stuff that came to our committee, we all signed off on. And subsequently Synod did as well. Yeah. And so, you guys did have a majority and a minority report, but I think it was a pretty solid majority report, right? I can't remember the percentages, but I think like 80-20, 75-25. I think it was closer to maybe 70-30, but it's still, there was a good sense of rallying around that majority report. Yeah. Even those that signed on to the minority report expressed that they could see the merits of it. They themselves personally couldn't endorse it, nor did they feel that there were people on the floor of Synod that couldn't endorse it either. So for that, they kind of put forth that minority report. But there was still a lot of camaraderie. There was a mutual respect in the room, especially as we closed our time. There was prayer. I think we even sang a song or something. I mean, there was just a really good spirit in the room. Unfortunately, that didn't necessarily carry over to the floor of synod. We got a little more contentious on the floor of synod, but for the most part, I was pleasantly surprised, at least the committee piece, where we landed and the work we got done.
Yeah. Yeah. We had the same. I mean, despite everybody, Committee 8 is now, we're infamous for forever for, being the committee that people walked out of synod on and everything. So I get to be the chair of that. That's what I get to go down being known for. Right. But in our committee as well, it was very non-contentious. We were able to speak the truth in love. People were able to disagree strongly, but respectfully. It was very good. But we've talked about this quite a bit over since 2023, that there is just a different dynamic between the intimacy of a group, of a advisory committee, and then the broader part of just on the floor. And there's a dynamic that does make it hard to have that. Now, they did have that this last synod. I felt like this last synod, in the midst of all of the difficult stuff, there were people speaking very strongly to both sides of the issues, but they were able to do it agreeably. So who knows what's going on with all of that. But I want to know, because you got to be the reporter then. You weren't even assigned to be the reporter, but since there was a majority report and the reporter of the committee signed on to the minority report, you had to pick a new chair and a reporter. And you had to be the guy who got to present this on the synod floor. So how did that come about?
Well, actually, just to back that up a little bit, I for the general work of Committee 7, I was the alternate secretary for that group. And so on the last day, we're finishing up our work. And of course, part of that is the majority minority type stuff we're tidying up at the end. But rather kind of suddenly, the secretary for the group, the main one, requested to step down from that position completely, for the whole report, not just the majority report, but the whole thing. And so suddenly I found myself as the alternate, now not the alternate. And so the whole business was kind of tossed my direction. So gotcha. I wasn't quite ready for that, but yeah. That's how it ended up.
Yeah, how did it feel reporting? Because you had probably, things blew up during my committee, but really I think I'm not saying anything about you, but I think because of all of the weightiness of Wednesday night, because that was probably the most contentious synod discussion I've ever been a part of. And then it kind of carried over and ended up, everybody was kind of wore out and exhausted. And then that's why things happened on Thursday. But you had to be the one there fielding questions and responding to that. What was going on in your mind and your heart during all of that?
Well, just as you are known infamously for the Committee 8 chair, I have a little of my own infamy because by the end of the day, I have to confess that my resolve at the end of the day had been tested. I found that as the day went on, obviously on all the matters that we had unanimous consent in committee, while that was all being debated on the floor of synod, because we had that consensus in the room, felt pretty confident. I felt, that, hey, we're having robust, conversation on the floor, and we're moving, and this, this stuff's getting approved. But you could just kind of feel it in the air. We're Wednesday afternoon, and we had already been there and dealt with a lot of stuff, long days, committee reports. So by Wednesday afternoon, I think the body as a whole both was tired, but was also like, over ready for this conversation. So there was just a lot of emotion in the room by the time we got to Wednesday afternoon. And if hindsight being 2020, I think I found myself and I expressed that a little bit after we convened after supper that night. I'd found myself just really wrestling with this thought in my head: we can do better. In this idea that not that everybody had to agree, but it was kind of how we were having the conversation, how we were coming at this, and it seemed like different motives and different intentions trying to drive certain things, and I just felt before we broke for supper this weight in my spirit, like, is this the best we can do? Can we do this better? And I went off campus by myself for mealtime because I needed to collect my thoughts, because I kind of anticipated the contentious piece still coming yet. And I just remember sitting there thinking, how do we do this better? And so after supper, we convened again, and honestly, I had just kind of reached my threshold. I honestly, my emotional stamina had reached its peak, and and I expressed this on the floor of Synod that we just got to do better. And it was in the midst of trying to answer the question from one of our fellow committee members, trying to answer this, regarding, and it was not necessarily, I would say, a question. It was kind of a setting the stage of a scenario and the woe of that. And I thought, there was part of me like, yes, I understand where you're coming from, but in that moment, if I be completely honest, transparent, in that moment, it felt a bit like kind of passive aggressive manipulating the moment. And we served on committee together. I have no offense, with that person, but I just felt in the moment, it's like, this is not how we do the business of the church. This is not healthy church here. And that just kind of honestly probably just broke my spirit. I just, there was just a part of me is just like, oh, this is the church, we could do better. And so my good colleague came up there and helped finish the evening and got us through the majority report. But yeah, that was quite an experience.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, my kids like to bring up too, because they saw from me, because I didn't really speak much during our committee report. I had, our reporter was doing the work. I said a little bit at the beginning, and I was weeping in that, and my kids are like, "Yeah, you cried in front of Synod," and it's like, well, yeah. And then they teased me because then when the Gospel Coalition's doing this article about everything going on in the CRC, the only 2 times they mentioned me is me crying, and so they're like, "You're such a crybaby, Dad." Well, it's like, but it's a big deal though, right? I mean, there's only so much emotional bandwidth we have, right? And so when we have these, I mean, it's really why I think 2023 was an example of why we needed to have such a decisive year last year to kind of end this conversation, because it was not heading down healthy trails. We needed to just kind of come to some conclusion.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think there needed to be some resolution to the tension in the air, and we needed a place to land. And I think the denomination as a whole needed this place to land, to understand. Okay, this is where we are at. And when I think about that whole basically already starting in 2019 all the way till Synod of last year, and think about how all of this unfolded, it speaks to something that's kind of been on my heart for a long time with the Christian Reformed Church, and that is, I don't know if I want to use the word identity crisis. Crisis might be crisis is a weighty word, but certainly dysphoria, maybe if you want to call it that. Just kind of trying to figure out, we've got so many things going on and so many things coming at us internally, externally. I think the debates of 22, 23, 24 were a microcosm of something bigger going on in the denomination, and that is, against this ever-changing backdrop, locally and nationally and internationally, who are we? I mean, what do we believe? When culture comes at this with these questions about human sexuality, or just the whole gamut of diversity issues and justice issues and creational issues and climate issues, when you don't have a sense of this is who we are, we're going to feel fractured. We're going to feel all over the map. And then this weird kind of desperation kind of sets in, and emotions get involved, and we start coming at each other, and we kind of lose sight of, well, what's our goal? What are we going after? What's most important? And so for me, watching this all transpire and being a part of it, really kind of spoke to the bigger issue of this, what I sense is a watershed moment for the denomination to figure out, who are we, what are we about, and where are we going? What I mean, it's fine. We can talk about maintaining structures and systems, but so what? Where are we going with all of this? And I think that's, for me, as I've been in this denomination all my life and been in full-time ministry for 20 plus years now, part of me still is like saying, okay, church, okay, denomination, where are we going? What's this really all about?
Yeah. I think that's a completely fair observation, and I'll be so bold as to make one too. Speaking on behalf of all three of us at Synod 2023, I think we just had entirely too much material in front of us. I mean, Steve, like you had said, and I had kind of said in our 23 reflection, we had 40 some overtures with a couple of communications. And Jason, your committee essentially should have been, in terms of content, you had the committee work of 3 committees.
It was 4 it was 4 different committees in 2024. So
well, and there we go. So I think we're learning from that, and I think our synodical staff are learning from that. Mm-hmm. As Steve was kind of saying, like, how can we do this better? I think some of those mechanisms are finally finding their place, which is good. But you're speaking to something else, Steve. Where are we headed? What is our trajectory? What is our identity in this denomination? And I guess my question for you is, now that 23 and 24 are both done, do you think we're finding a more clear path towards that trajectory?
No and yes. I think yes, in the sense of, okay, so we figured out, as it were, quote unquote, figured out this particular issue. There's still, in my opinion, something in the air that's not resolved yet. And it has to do with identity. It has to do with trajectory. And I've been doing a lot of reflecting on this whole concept of identity. Who are we? What are we doing? What are we about? And one of the things about identity I have found, and this was some of my personal study, I went back to Genesis 3. And I thought a little bit about the language that Satan used with Adam and Eve in the garden. And what struck me, and this was a number of years ago in studying this, and still kind of flushing it all out, but the 2 things that the enemy brought up in the garden had to do with identity. It was a distortion of God's identity. Did God really say? And then it was a distortion of man's identity. Well, you'll be just like him. And from that, got to thinking that if you really break down a lot of the brokenness in the world and evil in the world and the tensions and the divisions and stuff like that, if you step back, there's an element of the distortion of who God is. We're struggling to understand, who God is and understanding, his role in our lives. But then I think it's also, we're struggling in our culture and our time with humanism right now, and this concept of who we are. And what I found is that if you're going to do good work in identity, you need to address both of these elements. Who is God and who are we? And it sounds really simple, but that's where I think as the Christian Reformed Church, from a biblical confessional standpoint, we're in a good place. I mean, on those two elements. I mean, we got a good theology, and we've got a good set of doctrines that articulate who God is, and we have a good grasp on, again, theologically, doctrinally, who man is. But the tension is then, okay, how do we implement that? And I think, on the one hand, I think the Christian Reformed Church is in a good place because, again, we've had to wrestle through what do we believe and what do we understand about who God is and what do we understand about who man is. But at the same time, I think, in terms of trajectory, we're positioned well. It's just, I'm not sure we engage well. Okay? We can say this is what we believe, but it's how we choose to engage on these levels that we struggle. And I'll give you an example. And I shared this at a recent classes meeting, and I preface it by saying, don't shoot me until I'm done explaining this. Okay. So, for example, in the Christian Reformed Church, one of the struggles I have, and this is where I think, we struggle as a denomination in terms of our identity, is in all our publications, in all the stories and testimonies and whatever that the Christian Reformed Church articulates in its publications, its online social media, and etc., has a lot to do with, and this is where I could get in trouble, has a lot to do with, yay, Christian Reformed Church. Okay, yay, look at what we're doing. And to a certain extent, that's not a bad thing per se. But I guess the part that I'm missing, or the part that I struggle with, it feels at times, and this is where the identity crisis sets in, it feels at times like we're more concerned about making disciples of the Christian Reformed Church than we are of Christ. And that's an identity thing. It's like we're called to make disciples of Christ, but we're struggling in certain areas. So we're scrambling, as it were, to survive as a denomination. We're scrambling to, as it were, boost our morale, and we're losing sight of where we're supposed to be going. And one of the things I keep kind of communicating, maybe more than communicate, people maybe get sick of it in listening to me long enough, is it's about the kingdom. We gotta keep thinking about the kingdom. We're way too preoccupied with our own stuff right now. We this little, as it were, theological doctrinal detour we took the last 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, however you want to look at it, was in part essential, but at the same time, part of me says, did it really have to take that long? Because in that, I think there was a part of us that forgot, oh, wait a minute, this is what it's really all about, and that's disciples in kingdom. And so I think until we get some of that trajectory figured out, yes, we've got that good biblical confessional identity piece, but it's like, okay, but how do we make citizens of the kingdom? How do we make disciples of Christ? And if we get it right, terrific. And on the days we don't get it right, let's fix our eyes on Christ, the author and perfecter of our faith, and then we'll get it right. But I think that's we're just too self-preoccupied, and 400,000 by 2,000. Now we're 200 some thousand, and we're struggling in our identity. We're almost in maintenance survival mode, and it's just like, if our eyes are fixed on Christ and it's about the kingdom, it shouldn't be an issue of survival, because the church is going to be here till the Lord returns. And so in the confidence of that, let's keep pushing for the kingdom. We may not always get it right, but let's keep pushing for the kingdom. All right, I'm done preaching.
Actually, I'd prefer if you kept going. No, I think that really does answer the question. I was talking to somebody, I think this past August, and they said, what's our biggest problem in the Christian Reformed Church? And I said, to some degree, this isn't isolated to the Christian Reformed Church, but it's a misunderstanding of our theology proper, which bleeds into our anthropology. So our doctrine of God affects our doctrine of man. And essentially, that's what Calvin was saying. You can't rightly understand yourself without understanding your creator, and vice versa. So I think you're exactly right. And I think your perspective is very, in a sense, it's missional. And in a sense, it's also ecclesiastical, because, how does this happen? Well, through the ordinary means of grace that the church has at her disposal. So I think you're setting the tone exactly right here. I'm just wondering, at your point in ministry right now, what are some things that you're seeing in the Christian Reformed Church that are encouraging you in that direction?
Well, I think one of the things are the gatherings. I mean, they've started now, and pulling different classes together for conversation. I look at that two ways. Part of me says it's kind of a late to the game type of effort, in that these conversations should be ongoing or should have been happening already. And at the same time, I'm saying, okay, good. We're having these necessary, healthy get-togethers. We just had someone from the church here in Sioux Falls be a part of the one that was out in Boston, and just great report about the conversations going on around the table. And so gatherings, I think, are serving an important function towards that identity, that recognition that the hope of the world is the local church, and recognizing that, how do we strengthen the local church, and having these gatherings, I think, is a very hopeful thing. Obviously, with this and any other effort, the follow through is always, the key. Whether it's at the local church level, classes level, denominational level, are people going to follow through with the conversations they're having? So I think in that respect, I think also a net positive out of this season, as it were, of turmoil we went through, says that, we can do the hard work. When we get challenged, when we get pushed, we can do the hard work. Now, granted, for some, it didn't finish in the place they had hoped, and I'm empathetic to that. Nevertheless, as it were, most of our systems worked. They got us through some of this, and so I'm encouraged by that. And I think if we can get some of this identity stuff figured out, not only the who are we and what we believe and all of that, but it's like this transformational kingdom mindset of saying, hey, we've got something pretty awesome to share with the world. The Christian Reformed Church is in an awesome place, theologically, biblically, confessionally, ecclesiastically. We've got something to offer to the world. But if we're so preoccupied with ourselves, the world is not going to hear us. The world, in a way, the world could care less, and the world will remain unchanged unless we recognize all that God has given us, and then get serious about bringing that to the world around us, and bringing that change that's necessary in terms of the kingdom and transformation that the gospel compels us to.
Yeah. It's really one of those seek first the kingdom of God, and all these other things will be added unto you, right? And our
Yeah.
temptation is always to seek the other things. And God
Sure.
says, no, seek first the kingdom, and then these other things will be added unto you.
A number of years ago, there was the whole program of natural church development came out, and their big argument was, that organically Christ has already built into the church the things that are necessary for the church to thrive. Built it right into the DNA, and then if allowed organically to grow, that makes for a healthy church. And there's a piece of that I really like, in the sense that sometimes we make things more complicated than they need to be. And to the point about getting older, as I'm thinking about ministry and where we're at as a church and a denomination, just like what you said, Jason, it's real simple. Seek first the kingdom, and then God will add everything else that's necessary. Pretty simple stuff. And maybe that's some of the conversation, that needs to factor into what we're doing, is just saying, okay, how does this seek the kingdom of God? Great, let's go do it. And not form a committee. Let's just go do it. I mean, there's a place for committees. I realize that. But I think I just really feel we can't make this complicated. Christ has built this into the life of the church. Let's just do it. It's in the Bible. Let's just do it. And I realize that sounds simplistic, but I just, what else do we got? Like the disciples said to Jesus, where else do we go? You're the one who has the words of life. Well, then why is it that we go off on all these other tangents when we've got the words of life in front of us? Let's just do it.
Mm-hmm. No, amen. I think you've touched on that very well. Steve, we're kind of coming, to the end, to the close of our time. I think you've imparted just so much wisdom into all the listeners here, and we have a variety of listeners. We have pastors, different office bearers, missionaries who listen to this. I'm kind of wondering. We've been talking about, what it means to be a church with a missional identity, a confessional identity, an ecclesiastical identity, all of these things we've been talking about. What are some things you would leave the listener to kind of hone in and focus on?
Know what you believe and stay faithful. We're coming into, I still think, some unprecedented times. And I'll speak to this, on a national sense in the United States, but I think even to a certain extent, some global, circumstances such that it feels very much post-Christian. It feels very much like some of the challenges on the horizon may be beyond what we've seen in our lifetime. And we have got to have this identity thing figured out. Personally, the local church, denominations, whatever missional organization you represent, be very clear on what you believe, understand why you believe it, and then stay faithful. And just understand that we're entering a time that it could get really real, that it will cost you. It will negatively impact you to stay faithful. You may not be as popular or as welcomed or, necessarily invited to the table for the conversation. And we have to be at peace with God, knowing that that's okay. We need to stay faithful. The word's clear. These kind of times and circumstances are coming. Know what you believe, know why you believe it, and stick to it. Just stick to it.
That's all we have for this week. If you want to help us out and support the Messy Reformation, another thing you can do is sign up for our newsletter through Substack. That way, you'll get episodes and summaries sent directly to your email inbox. It will also give us the opportunity to communicate with our audience, which is one of the biggest struggles of a podcast. So head over to the Messy Reformation on Substack and sign up for our newsletter. But until then, don't forget this is Christ Church. and he bought it with his blood. And we've been warned that wolves will come in trying to destroy the flock. So, keep a close watch on your life and on your doctrine. Preach the word in season and out of season. And keep fighting the good fight in this messy Reformation.